We want to make sure Addie hears this good part. The determinant is 0, and can that work? No. So the inverse of Q does not exist. The inverse of Q does not exist. If the determinant is 0, the inverse does not exist. Any questions about that? Nope. Good. Look at y'all go. So now we're at the point we've all been waiting for. We get to solve the system of equations using this inverse stuff. Okay? All right, so looking at this first, I'm going to create 3 matrices. Starting with the coefficient matrix. What would be my coefficient matrix here? 1, 2, 3, -6. Then we're going to multiply that by what we call our variable matrix, xy, with 2 variables, x and y. And we're going to result that to be another matrix of numbers, specifically our constant numbers, the ones with no variables, 9 and 3. So I want to take you back. I have this little equation here, ax equal to b. And I want to get x by itself. I want to know what my variable is. What do we do to get x by itself? We do the opposite. We do the opposite, yes? Does everybody agree? So what is the opposite of this A matrix? What are we learning about? The A inverse is the opposite of A, right, for the matrix. So that means I'm going to multiply both sides by A inverse. And when I do that, the A's will cancel out because it should be the identity matrix if they multiplied correctly. And that's going to give me x equal to A inverse times B. And here's a little catch.
I didn't do that.
You can't do, hold tight. You can't multiply B times A inverse. You can only multiply A inverse by B. Any ideas why? Look at their dimensions. We've got a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 1. And if I multiply a 2 by 1 by a 2 by 2, I would have 1 and 2 in the middle, right? And it says I can't multiply those. But I can multiply a 2 by 2 by a 2 by 1. Is everybody with me? We're going to look at that in just a second. All right, what's your question, Sol?
That what I would do is, because if I see that, what I do is change, instead of like to leave the x by itself, you change the A and you have x
but this isn't numbers. This is talking about matrix. These aren't representing normal numbers. So normally we would do the opposite sign. It's multiplied, so we would divide, right? The opposite of a matrix is the inverse matrix. So I have to multiply both sides by the inverse matrix.
So you like jump the part dividing and you just change the sign, that's it, right?
No, it's like multiplying fractions. Let me show you that in a minute. So don't get hung up on that because this is all you need to know. To get my answer from this point right here, I'm going to multiply the inverse of A by the B. Okay? Do I know what A is? Yes. Do I know what B is? Yes. Okay? So I'm going to take and multiply. I need to find out my A inverse first. So I need to calculate the determinant of A. So what would that be? 1 times -6 is -6. Minus 3 times 2, which is 6, and that equals -12. Does everybody agree with that? So to find the inverse, I need to put the determinant under 1 and multiply by that new matrix. I'm going to go up here and write my A, B, C, D if you don't mind. That just helps me a little bit. And who's going to be my first element? which is -6. What's going to be my second element? -2, the opposite of B. The next one, -3, the opposite of C. And then lastly, 1, which is our A. And now I need to multiply -1/12 by every element inside the matrix, right? So I've got -1/12 times -6 should be a positive what? 1/2. And a -1/12 times a -2 will be a positive 1/6. And a -1/12 divided by a -3 will be a positive 1/4. And a -1/12 times 1 will be -1/12. So now I have my inverse. And in all this, I said I need to multiply my inverse by B. So that's where I'm going next. My inverse. My x is going to equal, my variables here, is going to equal my A inverse, which we say is 1/2, 1/6, 1/4, and -1/12. And multiply that by my B, which was 9 and 3. By the way, I guess I could do it like this. This is like just a cloud thought, right? It wasn't really any part of the work. Does everybody agree?
What did you switch the sign in like number D, in the letter D, in the result of the inverse?
I'm sorry?
What did you do -1? I don't know.
I don't have a -1. I only have +1.
No. The result of that?
-1/12
all that one, yeah.
-1/12 times a +1 is a -1/12. Negative times a positive is a negative. Right? You see it?
Yeah.
So the other 3 were negatives, right? So they all became positives, right? Because negative times negative becomes positive. But that last one wasn't a negative. So I had to make it it had to be negative. Okay. All right. So if I'm looking here, I have a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 1, right? So can I multiply a 2 by 2 by a 2 by 1?
Yes.
Yes, and it's going to result in a what?
2 by 1.
A 2 by 1. So it's going to look like this when I'm done. Is everybody with me? Okay. So I've got to row by column. There's only one column though. So I have 1/2 times 9 plus 1/6 times 3. And then on the bottom, 1/4 times 9 plus -1/12 times 3. Now I need to simplify. 1/2 times 9 would be 9/2 plus 1/6 times 3 would be 1/2. 1/4 times 9 would be 9/4. And -1/12 times 3 would be -1/4. Two last times. 9/2 and 1/2 make 10/2. And 9/4 minus 1/4 gives me 8/4, for which I can simplify to 5 and 2. Guess what that equals? X and Y. We started out with X and Y. We ended up with 5 and 2. So what is my point of intersection? 5 and 2. Now obviously this didn't have to be this many steps. So really it can be a very short problem if you're not showing every single little detail. But for our notes, since we showed every little detail, it was a little bit spread out. Any questions? All right, you may bring a note card, 3x5 note card with whatever you need on it for your quiz tomorrow. The quiz is over 3.7 and 3.8. I can't say I won't throw in some stuff from 3.6 though, because we didn't quiz over it. Okay? Is everybody with me? All right, fantastic.